Are you tired of spending too much of your hard-earned money at the supermarket? Are you dreaming of farm-fresh eggs, homegrown veggies, and homemade everything? Well, welcome to Ditch the Store, where we break free from supermarket dependence and take back control of our food and household essentials. I'm CJ, and I'm here to show you that life is too short for store-bought eggs. So let's get started. G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ditch the Store. CJ here on our own today, episode 157, chicken problems and fixes. Now, we've discussed chicken problems before and chicken health issues and stuff like that, but I just wanted to touch briefly again on chicken problems that you'll have that are really common, that are really very new chicken keepers might get and go, oh shit, what do I do with this? So this is not an in-depth health thing, and it's not an in-depth how to fix everything. There will be some things that aren't discussed, but it's just a brief overview of the kinds of things that you need to be looking for. And as always, I am not a vet. I am not a vet nurse. If in doubt and you are worried about your animal's welfare, then by all means contact your local vet. And it's a really good idea if you're getting chickens to make that really big assessment right at the beginning and say, what will we take to the vet? Like, when will we take an animal to the vet? Certainly for us, we don't take our chickens to the vet. If it's not something that I can manage on my own and we think that the animal's in pain, we will dispatch the animal rather than allow it to keep suffering. Same goes for our goats. We had a horse that grandma, who was 29 or something, and not doing so well. She'd started losing weight. There was a lot of issues. Worming wasn't working. Her teeth were fine. And we were at a point where I was about to say, get the vet out, because I'm not going to dispatch a horse. We didn't have a firearm anyway, but it would have been too hard to dispatch a horse. And so I was going to get him out to come out and put her out of her misery, because she was starting to look like she was very uncomfortable. And before we had an opportunity to do that, like, we literally put her in the round yard that afternoon and gone, all right, we'll call the vet tomorrow morning. And because it was late at night, and when we went out the next morning, she'd already passed. So we knew it was her time, and I would have been well and truly prepared to pay to have a vet help her go to sleep, but we didn't have to do that. But you do have to have that hard conversation with whoever's on the farm with you, if you're in an urban environment, have that hard conversation with hubby or the missus and say, what are we going to pay for at a vet and what are we not going to pay for? And have that decided before a problem arises, because then it's not a shock to everybody, and you're not trying to have this in-depth financial discussion with your partner about, I'm going to spend $1,000 on a chicken that costs $30, which is the handy helper and I, we just don't do that. It's not within our financial means to spend $1,000 on a $30 bird. But even our favourite birds, we would try and manage it ourselves. There are not many vets that can deal with a lot of the chicken problems that you can't deal with yourself. So we'll go through the basics and see how we go. And as always, I always say chickens are one of the best animals to start on your homestead. I think they are a really easy animal compared to, say, goats, for example, or cows, which require bigger equipment. They require more knowledge. If things can go wrong, they usually go wrong in a bigger environment kind of thing. Whereas with chickens, the things that go wrong can be quite minor and, like I say, very, very easy for people to hands-on fix themselves. And you might feel like you're treading water and you're out of your depth. But honestly, just a little bit of preparation and you'd be surprised what you can manage. But for the most part, chickens are really hardy. They're very productive, so you get a lot out of them straight away. It's not like cows where you have to wait like 12 months to 2 years before you can have it dispatched and put in the freezer. Chickens are producing pretty much straight away, so that makes them a really valuable asset. They also do wonders for cleaning out your chicken scraps and turning over your compost. We sometimes chuck the chickens in with the compost because they can turn it over, and it means less physical labour for us, which is always a win-win. But if you are new to keeping chickens or any livestock at all, when something goes wrong, it can feel like a bit of a crisis. And I guess the most important thing to do is just to remain calm and remember that there's always somebody out there who's been through what you've been through before you. So you will always have somebody that you can ask, and 99% of the time you will be capable of fixing it. If you just keep that in mind, you should be fine. The main ones that are going to get you are a hen stopping laying. So you might, if you've only got 3 or 4 hens and they've all been laying an egg a day, and all of a sudden you're down to 3 a day or 2 a day, and you think, what the fuck? Like, where'd that go? Where they lose all their feathers. And it happens during the molt. Every year they lose all their feathers. And when I say all their feathers, they're not walking around like completely featherless, but they look so patchy. They look like they're dying. They look like there's something really, really wrong with them. And all it is that they're losing their old feathers so that they can grow through new, healthy, beautiful feathers. Or when somebody lays a weird egg, they're usually the ones that you see people post on social media and go, I don't know what to do. So we're going to go through those. And at the end of the day, if in doubt, Google it. This is, the handy helper goes off at me and says, I Google death myself if I'm sick. I don't. I do Google and go, should I go to ER? Should I go to accident and emergency? Or what kind of home remedies for blah, blah, blah. I do that quite often. But when it comes to livestock, Google can be your best friend. Sometimes you'll get pages up for, like with the goats and worming. I've Googled in the past and found information pages that I never knew existed. And then I've been able to kind of bookmark them so that I can continually refer back to them to get more information. But these are the most common and simple ones that you will need to worry about. And just remember that simple is the key here. So the first one that seems to get posted on social media all the time is, my chickens have stopped laying. It's completely normal. It's the biggest worry for beginners, I think, because they think, oh my God, why'd they stop laying? Have I done something wrong? Did I not provide them with something? But there are a couple of reasons why it happens. First one, seasonal changes. And I've discussed this, I think I discussed it just last week. Shorter daylight hours means fewer eggs. Longer daylight hours means more eggs. So coming into a winter or a less lit period in your region will result in fewer eggs. And that's because, this is my understanding of it, the circadian rhythm of the chicken tells it when the days are getting longer is the time to produce more eggs. When the days are getting darker, it's the time not to produce as many eggs, because in nature, they're producing eggs so that they can sit on them and hatch out clutches of chickens. Nobody wants to hatch out a clutch of chickens in the dead of winter. It's not the ideal time to be sitting on eggs and hatching babies out, because the cold weather and wet weather would kill them. So nature tells the bird not to produce as many so that they're not sitting on eggs in the middle of winter. Moulting. Moulting is the second one. Now, moulting is a process where birds lose a vast majority of their feathers. And the reason that it happens is it's basically like a reset for the animal. So they lose all their feathers and they grow new feathers through. It's kind of like a dog shedding or a cat shedding their hair, and then they grow through a nice lush new coat. The feather situation is the same with chickens. But when the chicken is going through that molt phase, all of the energy, all of the nutrients going into their body gets taken up by the production of all the new feathers. And they can't do two things at once. They're not a machine. They're an animal, they're livestock, and their body has to cater to what is the most important need. And the most important need is regrowing feathers. So when they're regrowing their feathers, they tend not to lay. And that only lasts as long as until their feathers come through. Once their feathers are all through, then you will find that the laying will fever pitch back up again. So don't stress if they look all mangy and there's feathers falling out everywhere. Obviously there are other things that could be causing it. So what you want to be looking for is the whole flock starting to lose feathers. If the whole flock are starting to lose feathers, you are definitely heading into the molt. And the roosters lose feathers as well. So if you've got a rooster and they suddenly look like they're really mangy, they've dropped their tail feathers, things like that, they're going through the molt. If there's only one bird doing it, And if it's in specific patches, then that's a different scenario altogether, and I'm not going to cover that today. But that would likely mean that somebody's picking on that bird, or the rooster is being too aggressive in holding onto the back of the bird in order to breed. So that's something else you have to worry about. But we're only going to focus on molting today. So all the energy is going into regrowing the feathers, and that's why they're not laying. Age. Production does slow after a few years. Like all female reproductive systems, chickens have a certain number of ovum. I never say it right. Ovum. They have a certain number of eggs that they produce. And as they get older, that becomes more sporadic. So each year, for heritage birds in particular, for Isa browns, because they don't live as long, they go hell for leather for the first 18 months and then they peter off. Heritage birds can be 3 or 4 years old and still laying 3 or 4 eggs a week without a problem. But as they get older, we've got Agnes still, who's 8 years old, and she probably lays an egg about once a week. And we're happy with that. She's our matriarch. She's the mother of all chickens, so we let her go. She's not going anywhere. But it is something that as they get older, you do have to expect that the egg laying is going to peter off. Now, you have to make a decision. Oh, excuse me. You have to make a decision. Are you going to keep birds that aren't laying? If so inclined, keep the birds. Like I say, Agnes is going nowhere. With my Isa browns, I'm not as attached to my Isa browns. If they are really not laying, and I do have to segregate a few of them out very soon. It's been hard with the broken leg, but once I'm more mobile, we need to segregate some of the Isa browns out. If they're not laying, they'll probably get dispatched. Unfortunately, the Isa browns are no good for meat because they're so tiny. Like by the time you pluck them, there's just no meat left on them. So it wouldn't be worth it. But we would dispatch them only because I'm in a commercial-ish kind of situation and I'm not going to pay for food for animals that aren't producing. As I said, Agnes is different. Agnes is the mother of all chickens, so she can stay as long as she likes. And some of my other Araucans who are very, the heritage breeds, and they're still laying, they just don't lay very often. But take into account age. The next one is stress. Stress can cause animals to slow down on their egg production. Now, the stress can be from a variety of things. It can be a new bird coming into an existing flock, and they can be stressed and stop laying. It could be that you brought a new bird into an existing flock and that new bird may be aggressive or standing over one of your other birds, and that's causing that bird to have some stress reaction. It can be predators. So if you've got a lot of predators in the area, or if you've had a fox attack come near the coop or something like that, sometimes that stress can just trigger the birds so that they just go off the lay for a little while. But that shouldn't last very long. And once the predator issue has settled and not reoccurring, then they should go back to their normal laying. Moving coops. We have a chicken tractor that we move around our yard. So ours are pasture raised. They're out in a paddock with a fence around their chicken tractor. Obviously, that kind of moving doesn't seem to bother them. But if you were moving house and you were packing them up into a box and moving from point A to point B, sometimes you can have a couple of days where they don't lay because it's just a little bit of a culture shock for them to get into the new coop and get settled. Nutritional issues. This can be a big one. And I made the mistake with my Isa browns of we were still feeding a half and half when we first got them, when we first started using Isa browns 5 years ago. We were still using a half-half mix of pellets and scratch mix. And the more research I did, the more I realised that scratch mix is like chicken candy. It really is a treat. And it does not have everything in it that a young pullet needs to get laying and keep laying really healthily. So, quality layer pellets. Save the scratch mix for training. I use it if I want chickens to move and follow me a certain way. I will shake scratch mix and sprinkle it on the ground. As soon as they see the corn, they will come towards me. But for everyday food, quality layer pellets. Fresh water. We've had days during summer last year, I think it was last year, might have been the year before. No, it was last year when I was recovering from my knee replacement surgery, and the handy helper did a whole bunch of overtime, and the water troughs ran out twice in the space of 2 months. The next day after, it had had a dry day where they hadn't had a lot of water, and then we'd realised late at night and we'd gone up and filled up the water tubs. Once the next 24 hours after that, the number of eggs dropped off completely. So fresh water is really, really important for them. Not having access to fresh water, particularly in a hot time, can cause them a heap of stress and will stop them laying eggs. And then the last two things I've got here is just keep in mind that stress really does impact them, and be patient with them when they're not laying. At the end of the day, they're not, like I said before, they're not egg laying machines. They are livestock, they're animals, and they all have their own idiosyncrasies, and they all have their own funny little quirky ways about them. And you have to look at them like that. You have to sit there and go, it's okay if they're not laying. It's not the end of the world. They're going to come back on. I'll just make sure I do everything. And that way, when they do start laying again, it'll be fine. So next, weird eggs. So this can be a real thing that new chicken keepers really worry about. And you see people posting like, what's wrong with this egg? Why does this egg look like this? So there's a couple of different types of eggs that can occur. You can get soft shell eggs, so where the actual shell hasn't hardened and it almost looks like a membrane. Usually you can see the yolk through the skin of the membrane. Shellless eggs, which usually those ones you will find just like a yolk with no egg, maybe a very thin membrane, and the white sitting in the nesting box where they've laid the egg, but it just didn't have any shell on it. Now I've only seen it, I think, maybe twice. So they're not very common, those ones. The soft shell eggs are much more common. Double yolkers. It's definitely not a problem getting a double yolker. If you get a double yolker, that's like finding a four-leaf clover. When you get them, you take a photo and post it to social media, link me in and say, I got a double yolker. I love getting double yolkers. To me, it's like a bonus egg within an egg, Tiny fairy eggs. Now, we get these, especially with the heritage birds, when they first start laying, they will produce a tiny little fairy egg. The fairy eggs are awesome. When you crack them open, they're just like a normal egg inside, and they are a normal egg. You can eat them. They're not very big, so there's not much to them. That's really common when they first start laying. And the last one on my list is wrinkly eggs, where the shell looks kind of almost like it's wet paper mache on the outside. Inside, the egg's fine. Sometimes with the wrinkly eggs, the shells can be a bit fibrous, a bit coarse, and when you crack them, they get brittle and just kind of break everywhere. So that's definitely where you would crack those ones into another container so that you can try and get the eggshell out, because you'll end up with eggshell everywhere. Now, the most common cause for these kinds of things with the shells, with the different eggs, is young hens that are just figuring out how to lay eggs. So your fairy eggs are just about always going to be a young hen or a youngish hen that's coming off their first molt, and they'll lay these tiny little eggs. The wrinkled eggs, just about always the opposite end of the spectrum. They're older birds who are hormonally going through a few changes, and they'll start laying, I call them paper bag eggs because it looks like a scrunched up paper bag on the outside. Your soft shell, shellless and double yolks can happen at any age, but usually it is at the beginning or the end of the egg laying life cycle for the chicken. So what can cause these kinds of things? Well, the biggest one is a calcium deficiency, and it's really important with nutrition and along with your layer pellets to put oyster grit or oyster shell grit in the coop as well, so that they can get that into their croup and they can get it like inside their gullet, so that their croup, so that it mashes up food. And you can buy a calcium oyster shell mix, which gives them just that extra kind of calcium hit. But also too, if they're low, if they're deficient in vitamins, it might be a good time to worm them or delouse them in order to make sure that their system is able to be strong and put all of the effort into making eggs instead of all the effort into fighting something off. I mentioned age and hormones. The older they get, the more unusually shaped eggs we get. The younger they are, the smaller they are. But once they get past those fairy eggs, they usually start laying a reasonable sized egg. Stress, obviously, that's going to be a big one for all of those. And so if you can keep stress to a minimum, make sure that their coop is predator proof, make sure that they're not got changes. If you're introducing new chickens to the flock, I always do it at night time. So I'll keep them separate for a couple of days, make sure there's no diseases that they're carrying. And then when I introduce them to the flock, I literally carry them up there at night time, put them on one of the lower roosting shelves so that they know their pecking order, and I'll leave them there. And the next morning, they all kind of get up in the morning and go out into the pasture, and it's almost like they go, oh, we didn't see you last night, but now you're here. So they just accept the bird. We've not had huge issues with stress doing it that way. So that's always been a good way for me. Now, if they're egg bound, or if there is an egg stuck in the duct where the eggs come out, that can sometimes cause misshapen and weird looking eggs as well. Egg bound is a whole episode on its own, so I won't get into that, but it is something you can manage on your own. That being said, I've never successfully brought a badly egg bound bird back. They've always had to be dispatched. Egg bound it's a problematic thing, and once it happens, it can happen again, and yeah, it is hard to fix. Vet won't do anything more than you'll do, which is literally to fix egg bound, you just stick olive oil up their egg chute and try and loose the egg to help the egg come out. Usually the egg's too big or the shell's too hard and they just can't pass it. But if there's an egg stuck in there and an egg is laying up against it, sometimes you can get a misshapen egg because of that. So the main fixes are oyster shell, good layer pellets so that they're getting all of their good nutrition. And then if they're just laying those little fairy eggs or something like that, just time. Give them time. They will get better. They will get bigger eggs. They don't come with a manual. They are livestock. And no two birds are the same. So you might have one bird that just starts laying and is a perfect layer for their entire life. And then you get another bird that lays, 20 million fairy eggs before they actually lay a real size egg. And then they have other problems like soft shells and shells that are brittle and things like that. Every single one of them is different. Now, feather loss. We talked about it a bit before, but feather loss, when you see feathers going everywhere, like literally you'll walk into the coop and go, oh my God, has a fox been in and killed one of my chickens? There'll just be feathers everywhere. That usually means they're going into their molt period. They will all look scruffy. Roosters, hens alike, they all look scruffy, and it does reduce egg production. Now, the timing for it is generally middle of winter. Our girls are actually going through a molt period at the moment, and it's only March. So they've kind of gone a bit early. They may well have another little lull in egg laying come middle of winter, where our daylight hours here are not too bad realistically. But you'll get, reduced egg production. You'll get scruffy looking birds. There'll be feathers everywhere. Rest assured, they are just having their break. They're resetting their systems. They're going to grow back all those beautiful feathers again. And once the feathers are grown back, they will absolutely go back to laying eggs again. What I would recommend is that whatever time of year it is when your chickens decide to molt, make a note of it and just kind of keep that in mind, that that's when they molted. What you'll find is that it's usually between 12 and 18 months from then that they'll molt again. Ours tend to do it around 12 months, but I've heard of people saying, no, it's more like 18 months. Depends on the breed of the bird, but it happens. Now, what can you do while they're going through the molt? Honestly, you just got to ride it out. It could be 4 weeks, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 8 weeks. You just have to sit it out. And this is where preserving eggs, we talked about egg glut last week. Preserving eggs and having eggs that you can continue to use over winter, this is a perfect time for them because that's when you're not going to be getting as many eggs as what you normally do. But something you can do to help them along is it's a good time to worm chickens, it's a good time to delouse them because they don't have as many feathers. You can really get in and make sure that the lice aren't sticking to them. You can give them vitamin water. So there's little bottles of vitamins that you can drop into your chicken's water to ensure that they're getting all the nutrients they need. And you can up the style of protein food that they're getting. And I think I've talked about it before, being anywhere between 17% and 21% protein. Over 21% protein, studies have proven, does not make a difference and doesn't make for a better egg. But you may wish to, if you can get a hold of layer pellets that are sitting right on that 21%, you may wish to feed that during the molt period, just because that extra protein is going to help your girls to grow their feathers and get their reset done quicker and healthier. And be patient. They'll come out the other side of it. Now, I did mention before, you have to take it in context with the feathers disappearing. When feathers disappear, if all of the flock are losing their feathers at the same time, brilliant. That's molting, not an issue. If there are patches out of one chicken, you have to look at two different causes, and it's either bullying or aggressive roostering. So if you've got a rooster and they're aggressive with them, they can pull feathers out when they're mounting them. But it can be bullying from another hen. So there could be a dominant hen who is picking on a different hen, and they will peck at the one spot and they end up pulling feathers out in their aggressive pecking. If that's happening, then you'll need to work out a way around that as far as segregating the bullying hen or segregating the hen that's being bullied. Pecking order is such a weird thing. It's very hard to interject yourself and get anywhere. Usually if you interject yourself, you can cause more problems. The chickens don't understand. As far as they're concerned, they've got their pecking order sorted out. And once that other chicken realises she's at the bottom of the pecking order, everything will be fine. It doesn't always work like that, but yeah. But the other thing that can cause them to drop feathers is mites and lice. Now, bird lice is not something that can affect humans, although I will say that when the handy helper and I have been up there and deloused them, if they are infested with them, we come down and we have to have a shower straight away because both of us feel like our skin is crawling. Bird lice won't live on us as such as a parasitic, but it's still not very nice to have bird lice crawling up your arm. They're so tiny you can't see them, but you can definitely feel them. So mites and lice are a big one. And mites and lice are a simple and easy fix. There is a powder, and I always forget the name of it, penthanum or something like that. I'll put notes in the show notes. It's a dusting powder that you put over your chickens and it kills the lice. Now, if they're very heavily infested, you need to consider doing it twice in the space of 2 weeks. And at the same time, clean the coop out, hose it out if you can, hose out the nesting boxes and restock the nesting boxes with whichever filler you use. We use sawdust. So restock the nesting boxes with sawdust because the mites and the mites' eggs will stay in the bedding. So you have to clean the whole coop out when you do the chickens, when you dust them. Otherwise, you're just fighting an uphill battle there. You're not going to get rid of them. So that's only if you've got a couple of birds that are losing feathers and not all of them. If the vast majority are losing feathers, then you're going through a molt. The next one is bullying in the flock. This could be something that new chicken owners want to step in and fix, but you really can't. Pecking order is a funny thing. It's the rooster generally sits at the top of the pecking order. That being said, he's generally not aggressive to hens other than when he's mounting them. He can come across as looking aggressive. But you'll also have an alpha hen. So there'll be a hen who sits up on the same roosting perch as the rooster and is considered to be his equal. In our case, that's our Agnes. She's 8 years old and she's absolutely the matriarch of the flock. And the roosters don't even try and mount her. They sidle up next to her to go to mount her and she just glares at them and they walk off in the other direction. She clearly is the boss of the yard. But bullying can happen at any level. So you have different rungs of chickens within your flock. And depending on how many birds you have, depends on where they sit in the pecking order. Unfortunately, with smaller flocks, you'll notice it more than with bigger flocks because if there is an aggressive hen, she'll be aggressive to everybody because she wants to be the boss. Don't You can try and intervene, and if they're really damaging another bird, intervening might have to happen. You might even have to remove one of the birds. But in some cases, it is better to let them ride out that pecking order system and let them sort out who's sitting at the top of the food chain. Because once they sort it out, if the other bird accepts that that bird is higher up the food chain than they are, then everything goes back to normal, and it doesn't keep going. Every now and again, you will get a hen that just continues to bully, or a rooster. We've had roosters that definitely have gone to freezer camp because they've become aggressive, and they've become aggressive not just with humans chasing us through the paddock, but become aggressive with other chickens as well, so with their hens. And we won't tolerate that. The roosters are there as a first line of defence for our hens. Even though we have a Merrimer and all the rest of it, ours are pasture raised. If a fox comes in during the day and the Merrimer's not in the yard with them at the time, I would rather lose a rooster than a hen. Roosters are much more easy to get than hens, so I'd much rather lose one of them to a fox, and that would obviously alert the Merrimer, and the next thing she would be up there and taking care of it. But if they get aggressive to hens, they're out. I won't tolerate that, because they once they start getting aggressive, they just get worse and worse and worse, and then they'll have a go at a kid, and I don't want them having a go at any kids, even though our kids are now very fully grown and more than capable of picking up an angry rooster by its legs and tipping it upside down to stop it from attacking. 10 years ago, they weren't, and they would run screaming out of the paddock as soon as the rooster came anywhere near them. But the kinds of signs that you'd be looking for would be chasing. So a hen that's really targeting another hen and chasing it around the yard. Feather pecking, so that's where you'll notice one bird missing a certain number of feathers out of a certain spot. And one hen getting picked on by more than one other hen. So if there's two hens that seem to be cornering and ganging up on a hen, then there's an issue there. Now, there are ways that you can deal with it. If you only have one bullying hen, I tend to get something like a milk crate and put it over her and leave her in the yard with food and water, but leave her in the yard contained in the crate. And that gives the rest of the flock a chance to even themselves out while she's in purgatory. I'll leave her in there for a day, let her out, see if that curbs her behaviour. You might have to do it a couple of times. If it doesn't work, you will have to look at rehoming or dispatching, whichever one is the problem one for you. So I would say dispatch the bully, even though she sits at the top of the food order. The pecking order will resort itself out without the bully there. But if you've got one that's been damaged by other birds, then it might be worth dispatching that one, because you don't want it to be in pain or anything. And certainly, like I said at the beginning, we do not take our chickens to the vet. If we can't patch it up ourselves, then it doesn't happen. Now, some of the things that can cause bullying, because it's not just a bad hen. I mean, she could be a bitch. I don't think any species is immune to having one particular one that's just an absolute bitch of a person. And you could just have a really bitchy hen. But there are some reasons that can occur. And one of them is overcrowding. So too many chickens in too small a space, they get on each other's nerves. Be like living in a share house and, somebody's irritating you. You will impact your behaviour. Boredom. If they're locked in their coop all day, every day with nothing to entertain them, certainly we've not had problems with bullying, given that ours are pasture raised. Every now and then there'll be one hen that just takes a dislike to another and just has a bit of a snap at them, and we'll notice it, but it doesn't last long usually. And they have quite a lot of space, so it's not like they have to be in each other's face all the time. Introducing new chickens. When we introduced the Brahmas to the Arakans, there was a little bit of push and shove. But the funny bit is they've kind of sorted themselves out. They still stay in their own little groups, their own little flocks, but they don't pick on each other anymore. There's not this, you're in that camp, I'm in this camp. They just do their own thing and ignore each other. So obviously the way to fix that is more space. If you can have them out free ranging, if they've got space to move away from the chicken that doesn't like them, that's going to make it easier for everybody. Extra feeders, because sometimes it can be, I'm at this feeder, and I tell a story about our Abby, my Anglo-Arab mare, doesn't like sharing her water trough with anybody. other horses, cows, goats, anything. And Millie, our very docile Frisian cow, walked up behind her to have a drink out of the water while Abby was drinking out of the water trough, and Abby kicked Millie through a fence. And she actually got her leg stuck in the fence, and I had to race down there and try and pull a cow out of the fence, which it was no easy feat. The OJ was there and he helped me, but it was a nightmare. And the poor cow just stood there looking at me like she had no clue what just happened. Some animals don't like sharing their watering and feeding containers with other animals. And so if you have, a lot of chickens in a small space coming out of one feeder, there's going to be more chance that somebody's going to get aggressive with somebody else. Distractions. There are so many chicken toys on the markets now, but you can also put things in there like get a cabbage and put a rope through it, hang it from their chicken coop so that they can peck at it and it moves, and it just gives them something to do other than picking on the other chicken. You can put swings in there, you can put toys in there, you can put mirrors and things like that. Birds, they're very similar to budgies in that they'll go and have a look at themselves. Anything like that gives them something to do other than picking on the other chicken. And slow introductions. Like I say, we do our introductions. If we're introducing a new bird, they go in overnight, and we put them up on the perching area, but we place them there. Otherwise, with our Brahmas, because we had a whole flock of Brahmas that we were trying to integrate, we just moved their fences closer and closer together so that they were up against each other with their fences. And then eventually we opened the fences between the two so that they'd had time to be right up against each other. And that, like I say, there was a little bit of a pecking order issue, but it came through without too much problem. I'm probably going to go over time. I just realized I've got a couple more to get through. Egg eating. This is something that people go, what do I do? There's a couple of really easy fixes for egg eating. That being said, some birds will just continue to do it. And if they continue to do it, it's going to be one of those things where you do need to consider dispatching the chook. You can't have a bird that's just going to continually peck at eggs and break them open and eat them. But what you'll find is you'll find a broken egg, and the best way to have a look around and see who's doing it is see whose beak is covered in either gunk from the yolk or dirt because they've had gunk from the yolk on their beak and gone out and tried to dust the yolk off, and they've ended up with a clump of dirt stuck to their beak. So it's pretty easy to find who's doing it. There's a couple of reasons they do it. The big one is boredom. So if they're locked in their coop all the time, more inclined to happen. The more you give them to do, the more free ranging they do, the less chance that they will try and peck at eggs. It can be a nutritional deficiency. It can be that they don't have enough calcium or shell grit in their diet. So make sure that you've covered off on that before anything else. And the other thing is curiosity. Now, when that happens, what you want to do is make sure that it doesn't become a habit. If it looks like it's becoming a habit, you can look at getting roll-away boxes. So they're the nesting boxes that have a slight slant, and after the chicken lays its egg, the egg will roll into a cushioned area at the back of the coop, at the back of the nesting boxes. So then you can just flip the lid on that to get the eggs out, but the chickens actually can't reach the egg once it's rolled through and underneath, and that's why they're called roll-away boxes. Now, we don't use roll-away boxes. I want to get to that point eventually. I think it would be very handy, and it means that we don't. Sometimes we have girls get in there and they try and get two into a nesting box at the same time, and one will tread on an egg and break it. So it's not that they're eating the eggs, but they've just broken it. So, it may be that they're not eating the egg. So check that first before you kind of blame anybody for eating the egg. But a couple of fixes you can have for that one is collecting your eggs regularly. Obviously, every day you want to be collecting them. If you miss a day, it's not the end of the world, but it's better if you can collect them every day. Dark nesting boxes. If they can't see the eggs, like can't see them clearly, they tend to be less curious about what's in there. So that can sometimes help. The roll-away nesting boxes that I mentioned, that's one of the really big ones that saves a lot of hassle. The egg rolls away as soon as they stand up after they've laid, and even if it's their egg, they can't get at it. It's already gone. As soon as they stand up, it's gone. And make sure they have adequate calcium. Now, the really good way to fix it if you have one that's got that habit and won't shake it is go to the produce store or your Tractor Supply store. They sell fake eggs for when you have chickens that have gone clucky and you don't want them to sit on eggs. So to let them ride out their cluckiness, you can get fake eggs to put underneath them so they think they're sitting, and you let them ride out their 3-week period of sitting on an egg and nothing hatches and away they go. And that works really good if you don't have a rooster and you don't want them to go clucky. Now those eggs, the fake eggs, sometimes they're plastic, but sometimes you can get concrete ones. And the concrete ones is what's going to fix any girls that are breaking open eggs. So what you do is you find which one it is, you segregate her into a separate area, and you only leave her with concrete eggs. And every time she lays, you race out there as quick as you can and take her fresh egg off her and only leave her with concrete eggs. She will peck them a couple of times and she will not break them, and it really won't hurt her beak. She's not going to peck hard enough to damage her own beak. It might give her a bit of a love tap when she does tap it if she goes too hard, but she'll work that out pretty quick, and you'll find that it will break the habit really, really quickly. We've only had one that did it, and the concrete egg worked an absolute treat. Parasites. Parasites are probably something that people really don't factor in when they get chickens. If you have birds outside that are exposed to wild birds or any other animal out in that environment, any bird out in that environment, they will end up with lice and mites. And there's nothing you can do about it. Most of them will come with lice and mites on them, even from hatcheries and things like that. You can't eradicate it completely. All you can do is keep it in check and under control. And I'll put the name of the stuff that we use, the powder that we use. It's just literally it's a dusting powder. We use it for our goats and we use it for our chickens because it works on both. What you're looking for is birds that are itching all the time, pale combs because the mites will suck blood from the chickens and makes them a little bit anemic, and dirty vents. If they've got a lot of poo around their vent area, there's a good chance that they have mites. Lice is almost the same. Feather damage and irritation are the main ones. Now, if you pick up a bird, the simplest way to see, pick up a bird, look at the base of the feather. If you can see little things crawling around the base of the feather, and sometimes it'll mortify you, like with the goats when they've got bad lice infestations, sometimes you flick their hair back to look, to check their lice and go, oh shit, they're covered. It doesn't take long. And if you've had thunderstorms or things like that, my understanding, it could be an old wives' tale, is that lice and fleas and things like that the eggs tend to hatch more during thunderstorms, or barometric pressure changes is when eggs hatch more. So after those kind of hot, humid, wet, thunderstormy days, you'll find that birds and goats and things like that have more external parasites than they did before. The powder that you dust over them, dust it over them. 2 weeks later, go and dust it over them again, particularly if they've had a bad infestation. But the really important bit is clean the entire coop out. You've got to clean everything out of the coop and clean out all their nesting boxes, hose everything out. You can get a liquid lice wash that you can do the inside of a coop with. I've used it before, where you just mix it up in like a spray pack and spray all the walls, spray the nesting boxes, everything. Let it dry, so keep all the chickens outside, let it dry, and then refill the boxes if you're using sawdust in the boxes, and allow the chickens to come back into the coop then. You do need to keep on top of it though, so check them again 2 weeks later and see if it's worked. If it hasn't worked, go again. And that's all you can do. Is, like I say, they'll always have some lice. What you want is them not crawling in lice. So you might see 1 or 2 on them, but if you can't see clusters of it, then you're probably on top of it. Now, a couple of other things that you can do apart from the coop cleaning is dust baths. Chickens will actually try and keep their lice problem at bay, but they need a dust bath. And you want to put ash and sand in that, and you can put a bit of, I always say it wrong, dimaceous soil, earth, in there as well, because it can have quite a good property for culling. It basically coats the lice over the outside of the actual lice and stops them being able to breathe and breed and move around and do things. So any of that kind of thing, just get like an old tire and fill it with ash and sand and diatomaceous earth, and they'll go in and clean themselves. Chickens know how to look after themselves. They'll do it themselves. You don't have to do it for them. But poultry dust or the lice powder, if it gets to the point where you can't really, if they're bad with it. And I would say probably check them once every 3 months. We dust probably about once every 6 months, but we check about every 3 months. Now, the last one, I think it's my last section, is when to actually worry. At the beginning, I said you need to make a decision about when you would go to a vet for something. And so it's really important that you already have that set in your mind. Am I prepared to take my chickens to a vet to get them fixed, or am I going to say, no, if it's something I can't fix or manage, then I will dispatch them. As a chicken owner, as a responsible chicken owner, you really need to have that plan in your head before you are in a panic state trying to decide what you're going to do. But the kinds of things that require a bit more attention is lethargy, where they're really flat, really not moving, sitting in a corner, huddled, anything like that. That's probably a sign of an illness that you, at very least, want to isolate the bird from the rest of your flock so that it doesn't, if it hasn't already given it to everybody else, it doesn't then give it to everybody else. If they're not eating, sometimes, and eyes are browns, they just drop off the perch when they're done. We go up and they'll be fine 1 minute and the next minute they're dead in the paddock. But generally they will have lost a little bit of weight. Like you'll notice, you'll go up there and go, that one's looking a bit skinny at the moment. They just stop eating. If they've stopped eating, then there's a good chance there's something really wrong. Breathing troubles. Avian flu is highly contagious and it can be passed by wild birds. If you have one that has breathing issues, please segregate it from the rest of your flock. Put it in a cat carrier, or if you've got a little pen that you use for little chickens, put it in there. You can always sterilise the pen afterwards. You want to keep it separate till you identify what it is. And look, it could just be that they've caught like a flu, not the avian flu. And, sometimes they'll die from it. And so long as the rest of the flock don't go down with it, you're okay, you're in the clear. But you just don't know. Severe injuries. Obviously, if they've been attacked by something, a dog, a cat, another predator, if another chicken has damaged them. I've once, growing up at my mum and dad's, saw another chicken attack a chicken so badly around the face that it actually took its eye out. Obviously chickens could survive with only one eye, but it's not ideal. And mum just dispatched the chicken straight away because she said there's no point in having it walking around suffering and being in pain. So severe injuries, you have to make a decision. But always, if you think it's an illness, always isolate the bird, always have it somewhere where you can observe it. I don't want to say Dr. Google everything, but if you're not going to go to the vet, I would definitely jump on to a site where somebody like me records things that can go wrong with chickens so that you can try and get some advice as to what it is. There's also a few Facebook pages. I know with goats in particular, there's a couple of Facebook pages where vets will come on and answer questions about, this is what I've got. Is this worth trying to fight for, or is this not worth fighting for? And a lot of vets can be very practical about it and say, well, you could fix it, but it's going to cost, and there's a lot of medication, or there's a lot of work involved. And that way you can at least make an informed decision about what you're going to do. But I guess really importantly is if you are watching your chickens all the time, you will know what their behaviour is like. And if you look and you think that behaviour is a bit funny, then chances are that behaviour is a bit funny, and have a closer inspection, see what you can do. So that's it for this week. We've been through everything. Like I said, that was just a couple of quick fixes for things. There's so many other things that we could talk about. The egg bound, I could go on for hours. Bumblefoot, which is a foot issue where they're limping all the time. They've got sore feet. There's lots of other things. I do cover some of it in my book that is, I keep saying it's going to be published soon. It's not even finished. With my broken leg, everything went on the back burner. But hopefully in the next month, I will have another book out, which is egg keeping, like backyard egg keeping guide. But if in doubt, jump on the Facebook pages, or I'm more than happy for you to reach out to me and say, hey, I've got this. Do you know what this is? If I don't know, I will tell you I don't know. I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. But if I can help, I would love to help you. Anyway, that is it. I will see you all next week, and I can't even remember what next week is about. So we'll all find out next week. Bye for now. Well, that's it for today's episode of Ditch the Store. If you're loving the journey to self-sufficiency, be sure to subscribe. You can also leave a review for us or share this episode with a friend who's ready to break up with their supermarket. If you've got questions or success stories, we'd love to hear about them on the socials. You can also find me at www.mojohomestead.net. Until next time, keep raising, growing and making. And remember, life's too short for store-bought eggs.